You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Look, it's obviously, it's LSU-Florida week, but it's a weird week. It's 11 a.m. LSU's not playing too great right now. We all understand that. Yeah. I kind of want to bypass the coaching search conversation because everybody's kind of got their opinion on it. We've talked about it so much. I would like to get your opinion as a guy who played on the offensive side of the ball at a very high level. I'd love to get your thoughts on what you've seen from Max Johnson through 8 career starts and 6 games this season.
I've actually been really impressed with Max. I mean, you talk about a pretty tough circumstance, even dating back to last year, having to make his debut in this game in the Swamp as a 3-touchdown underdog. It was not an ideal situation with as splintered as that team seemed to be, and I felt like the team kind of rallied around him. And then this year, I think a lot of people expected him to start the season as a backup before Miles Brennan went down, and again to kind of be thrust in a situation where there's not a whole lot of help. I mean, you don't see much of the run game to take the pressure off of him. The offensive line has been really poor in pass protection. More times than not, I see him throwing off his back foot under duress and still making a lot of plays. So do we see him make some errors from time to time that are, probably ones that he shouldn't be making for sure? But we're talking about a guy that's still within his first, 8 starts of his career playing in the SEC. There's a lot that, I think you learn through taking some lumps sometimes. And so I've been very impressed with him. I do hope that it doesn't turn out to be a situation. I remember David Carr, first-round draft pick to the Texans, didn't have much protection, kind of ended up being shell-shocked after all the hits he took early in his career. So I just hope that what he's going through right now doesn't stunt his overall progression, because I think he's got a chance to be a really good one, and I've seen a lot of promising things so far this year too.
If there's one maybe, I would say, legitimate criticism of his game so far, it's been at times, CD, he's struggled with the deep ball accuracy. How much of that is coachable, and how much of that is just like who he is as a player? I don't know if I asked that question well, but does that make sense? Like, how much better can he get at that?
Well, one, I mean, deep balls take longer to develop, and if you don't trust your offensive line, I'm sure you're going to be a little antsy and trying to stand in there and let it go. I mean, we talk about throwing go routes. Go routes are 42 yards down the field, 5 yards from the sideline. That's where, as receivers, we're always, against off coverage trying to catch the ball. Well, it takes some time to let that develop, and so I don't want to judge what he's doing on his deep throws right now because of the being under duress and probably not having as effective ability off the play-action passing game because the run game's not working. So I do think you can coach that up. I do think accuracy comes with having a good base, comes with having quiet feet, comes with having good technique, and so I do think it's hard to maintain all of those things when you're constantly under pressure the way that he's been so far.
What about losing Kayshon Boutte? How much of an impact does that have, not only for the LSU offense, but for Max?
It's huge. I mean, he's been his security blanket. He's been the go-to guy. He's been the one guy you can trust the most in any situation. And so it's disappointing for Max. It's disappointing for LSU. It's disappointing for SEC fans in general. I mean, Kayshon Boutte was one of the top 2 or 3 receivers coming into this year, and he certainly didn't disappoint. I think he built on a solid freshman season last year and was off to a great start this year. I love his entire game, and so as a former receiver, I'm disappointed to not get to see him the rest of the year because he's been so much fun to watch in the first half.
He's on Twitter at Chris Doering, SEC Network, and of course, however you get your podcast, Pregame in the SEC with Hester and Doering. Make sure that you subscribe to that podcast on Spotify and Apple iTunes. CD, it is kind of weird, man. LSU and Florida, which for a decade was probably the best game in the SEC, at least half a decade. Yeah. It just isn't this year. I mean, it's largely circumstance, but I mean, what kind of energy or emotion do you expect surrounding this game on Saturday, considering what these two teams are, quite honestly, not playing for? I mean, neither team's going to Atlanta. So what's on the line?
It's interesting. As I heard you say, hey, the game's kicking off at 11 a.m. local time, it took me back to my senior year in 1995. LSU wasn't very good then. We came in and played in that early window. The atmosphere was very dead. It didn't have any of the makings of a typical, Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, obviously. And so I just, I lament the fact that I didn't get to play in that stadium against a good LSU team when they had it rolling. And I think, I feel bad for Florida not getting to experience that this year. I feel bad for LSU being where they are. But, it's something special about going to play in that historic stadium under the lights. And so I don't expect great energy. I'm quite frankly, worried about Florida's energy. This is a team that, a lot of their goals are out the windows, 5 games in after they lost to Kentucky. So they did obviously had a little bit of a bounce back game against Vanderbilt, but this is a much different opponent. And my hope would be that you realize what LSU means historically and you know what it means to go play in this stadium, and you find a way to get yourself up. But, 18 to 22-year-olds don't always think like you and I do. So I'm a little concerned about both of these teams' focus level, quite honestly.
Is there a spot for Anthony Richardson to have a big day, however this is game planned for Dan Mullen?
I'm honestly of the belief that they're trying to minimize some of what Anthony Richardson is doing. I think I look at what Emory Jones did in those 2 games against Alabama and Tennessee when Anthony Richardson wasn't available, seemed to play better without having to look over his shoulder. I think it's weird sometimes as a quarterback when you're flip-flopping back and forth, and I think that Dan is trying to provide him with some stability, and I think that's one of the reasons you saw Emory play so late in the game on Saturday against Vanderbilt. When the game was in hand, he understands that just like Max Johnson, that Emory's still very early in his starting career, actually has less starts than what Max Johnson does. So he's still feeling his way out, still has some room for improvement, needs to eliminate some of the throws that have gotten in trouble from time to time. But obviously, if you have an explosive player, you want to get him in the game and get him an opportunity to get touches. But I don't know how much of that's going to be at the expense of the rhythm for Emory Jones and also the development that still continues to take place. You go back and look at 2019, Emory came in and made some really good plays against the ultimate national champion in that same stadium. So I think there's at least a comfort level on how Emory's going to react in that environment versus Anthony, who made a bad throw. They ran a tight end delay throwback last week, threw it into coverage when there was no play there. I think he's still kind of pressing, trying to make the most of whatever limited snaps he's getting. And I don't know that that's a great position for him to be in either.
Hey, Chris, before you go, Bama, Georgia, Bama, whatever order, 1-2 in the SEC. I think everyone agrees on that. I got asked the question earlier today, who's the third best team in the league? And I didn't want to say Kentucky. Because honestly, I thought Florida was better than Kentucky when they played, outgained them and all that stuff. But on the day they played, Kentucky won. Who's the third best team in the SEC?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I think the dynamic in the SEC in general is interesting because we're talking about 2 teams. Even if Kentucky loses to Georgia this week, which I quite honestly probably see happening, you're talking about a team that can win out the rest of the year. Look at their schedule; it's fairly manageable. You look at the schedule that Ole Miss has, there's a decent chance that they might be able to win out as well. We're talking about 2 teams that likely won't play in the SEC championship game that could have arguments for being in the college football playoff discussion, but yet I think the reputation, particularly Kentucky's, may work against them outside of the SEC and even inside. As you said, the feeling that you had not wanting to admit that they might be the third best team in the conference comes from what we've known in the past of Kentucky football, and those that have seen this team and seeing the program being built know that this is a much different Kentucky than what we've dealt with for the majority of our lives. And so I'm very impressed with what Coach Stoops has done. The defense is fantastic. The offense at times is erratic, but I think it found a little bit of a rhythm last week against LSU. Obviously, it's built on being able to run the football, which they did well. But I thought Will Levis made some better throws on the short to intermediate throws that he'd been missing in previous games. I don't know that they can have the explosive plays that they need to have against the Georgia defense. That's the only way you're going to be able to beat Georgia, is being able to have some plays that you can catch them, on a 2-play drive where you go 80 yards as opposed to trying to drive 11 plays. I just don't see teams being able to do that against this Georgia defense this year. But all in all, I do think that Kentucky is probably the third best team, and I don't think a lot of people outside the conference or even inside have recognized how much this team has grown and how far this program's come in general.
It is amazing to think, but I don't know how you make the argument to the contrary, especially when they beat Florida on the field. But here we are. He's Chris Doering, SEC Network, Sirius XM, SEC Radio. There's a bajillion other things I can mention. Let me also mention pre-gaming the SEC with Jacob Hester and Chris Doering. Apple, Spotify, go search pre-gaming the SEC, download it, subscribe, and you'll have it downloaded every time that they drop a new episode. CD, it's a pleasure as always, man. Thanks for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, always good catching up, Matt. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.